Hello, everyone. Here is the American Aboriginals, and we are back. I know it's been a minute, but I wanted to address a particular controversy that's in the news as of late. And I was actually in the middle of recording another video and saw this, and I said, let me stop and really address this particular controversy that we have been finding ourselves in related to a music video and song that was released by a country singer. And I wanted to talk about this a bit because there's a bit of propaganda that's happening and people are being sucked in. And particularly with regard to American Aboriginals, I want us to be very, very mindful of this, because if you're not, then you're going to find yourself kind of caught up in these discussions that really are offensive and you don't even know that it's happening to you. So the title of this particular presentation is The Myth and Propaganda of Small Towns, which is the title of the song includes Small Town. I won't necessarily mention the name of the artist. You guys will probably know who it is if you do a quick Google search. The lyrics were not written by him, but they were written by his songwriting team. And also the video was directed by a particular director who is well known for directing music videos of a lot of country artists. Like, he is like the go-to for these particular artists. The reason why I call this propaganda is we have to always remember that sometimes controversies come from, yes, a lot of that's happening in society and the community. But if you propagandize it and kind of, I guess you can say, kind of filter it through what's actually happening, people won't even think that it's propaganda, right? So, but before we really dive into that, I want to show you guys these images from the video. And it's really important that we pay attention to this, because sometimes we don't realize that we're being a bit programmed or brainwashed until we analyze it. So as you can see here, there's 3 images, screenshots I took from the video, where the particular artist is performing in front of a building. It's a very historical building, and I will get to that in a minute. But I just want to start off with this so that you guys have this particular image in your mind so that you'll understand the context of things. So on the surface, the song is a protest song, right? And the gist of the lyrics, when you listen to the song and you look at the music video, is that the folks in small towns don't tolerate what happens in the big cities, such as random acts of violence, flag burning, protests, attacks on police officers, or their guns being confiscated, right? And as the particular artist says in the video, they're good old boys. And I will just let that land for a minute. But on the surface, it's a protest song. It's very popular. It has a really good beat. It's very catchy, and everyone's loving it right now, right? Even those who are melanated are loving the song. So at the core of it, who is the target audience of this music video? Because I always think about target audience and who you're speaking to. And when you listen to the lyrics, you will see that there are various people that he's talking to. He's talking to criminals, the Antifa type, extreme leftist type of people. I put a question mark there because sometimes I think, unless the artist says it himself, that I'm just making assumptions, and I don't want to do that. So when he talks about protests, he's probably talking about the average citizen, right? Because most of us have protested something in our lives, right? He's also talking about the attacks on police officers. Again, we're talking about most people who do that are extreme leftists or who don't mind getting arrested, those things of that nature. And then he's talked specifically about guns being confiscated. So that to me is kind of like a direct jab at the state, local, and federal government, because those are really the only people who can confiscate your guns, at least legally. So the reason why I go back to this being propaganda is that what propaganda does is it mixes the fact with the fiction to create an emotional response, which is it really has done with people, and people are up in arms about things right now, and we're all feeling the effects of various things that are happening in society. But when you look at this particular video, it mixes all of those things up. Now, some of the clips from the video actually come from real events or news footage. I double checked that myself. But there are also 6 clips that were from stock footage, meaning that if you go to and I won't name the companies here, but if you go to certain companies, you can get stock footage that you can use for any purpose. You can use it for music videos, you can use it for documentaries, you can use it for even your films. Whatever it is, you can use the stock footage, and it's very generic, and usually are actors involved. So you've got stock footage mixed in with the new, right? And then one of the clips is actually from a fictional movie called Don't Look Up that was on Netflix. So you've got the fictional, you've got the stock footage, and you've got the real all in this video. And what's really, really interesting, there's also clips that include protest, but some of these protests occurred in Europe, right? Specifically the Ukraine, Spain, Germany, and Canada, and one as far back as 2010. Now, this isn't to say that these protests were not in solidarity to what was happening in the United States. But as you guys know, there's been protests all over the world on various issues and matters. So again, what you're seeing is fact and fiction mixed all together to create an emotional response in people that may or may not have anything to do with the topic or the lyrics at hand. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you so that you understood the context of the music video, right? So now the big thing I want to talk about here is the myth of small towns. And I think it's really, really important that we myth bust here, because when you look at the music video and you listen to the lyrics, there is a clear distinction made between those in small towns and those who live in the urban cities, right? Their perception is that in small towns, we don't take this and that. We are good people. We're not going to tolerate this behavior, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As if those who live in cities do tolerate that behavior. Now, keep in mind, and I speak from personal experience, I've lived in big cities and in rural areas. So I have that perspective on both ends. So when you look at the research, however, you'll find that violent crimes in small towns are unlikely to be reported. So that tends to mask the official data that small towns are less violent than urban centers, right? And that's true of urban of cities. A lot of people won't even report the crimes. But particularly in small towns, it's the same dynamic. And it's probably even more so because you know your neighbors. You probably work for an employer and his son might have done something, but you don't say anything because that's your boss's son, right? And here, statistically, only 42% of such crimes and fewer than 56% of serious violent crimes are actually reported to the police in rural areas. So again, there's this perception that small towns don't have issues. They really do. But most people aren't going to talk about it because they know their neighbors, because they know who it is, right? And they don't want to create controversy. So the other dynamic here is that violent crime rates are about 20% higher in urban areas versus rural areas because of the differential in robbery rates. So most of your violent crime rates, and the reason why they're high in cities is because you have those robbery rates that are included in those statistics. So naturally, robbery is going to be higher in cities because you have more opportunities, more target areas to rob. You've got stores, you've got homes, you've got apartments, you've got, regular people on the street, you've got all these different places that you can rob. So naturally, the robbery rates are going to be higher because you have more target areas. You don't have as many target areas in the rural areas. However, aggravated assault rates are the same or higher in rural communities. Isn't that interesting? That's really, really interesting. So think about that. And when it comes to homicide, again, the differences are minor. You've got 5 homicides per 100,000 people in urban areas and nearly 4 per 100,000 in rural areas. So, and here it goes back to perception, right? And if any of you have seen any true crime documentary or true crime series on television, you'll see that these crimes that happen in small towns are very heinous, incredible. Just extreme ones where people are butchering family members and burying them or murdering people for insurance money. Like that's just the beginning. And so my question has always been, if say you are living in a rural area and you have this heinous crime that happens, what's that's influencing that crime if you do not have the stresses of living in an urban area? Well, it's your nature, right? If you're going to commit a heinous crime, that's your nature. It doesn't matter where you're living. So again, there's this assumption that you're safer in a small town and that crime isn't happening. But no, it's not true. Small towns still have the same issues as big cities: violent crimes, robberies, aggravated assaults, and homicides. So again, that's why I go back to this particular song being propaganda, because the statistics are telling me that no, small towns are just as violent, but people aren't reporting it. They're pretending. They're saying, oh no, we're not going to talk about that here. This doesn't happen here. Oh, we're so shocked, right? No, it's only that these things are being done in private and you don't see them, right? So again, I always go back to facts, always go back to statistics, because that is the true story. It's not my emotions, it's the facts. So again, now I'm going to circle back to the images that I showed you guys before. And the reason why I say location, location, location is in the film industry, location is everything to the success of your particular, whatever it's your film, your documentary, your music video. Locations are very, very important and they're very, very symbolic. So keep that in mind as we go forward. So underneath the song lyrics in the video is a great deal of symbolism, as I've mentioned to you before. But from a historical perspective, I really want to focus on this as American Aboriginals channel, because the location of the video has this particular artist performing in front of the Maury County Courthouse in Columbia, Tennessee. And it's a very popular filming location in the state, right? And what is probably known by many of you by now, or will be known after this video, is that this is also the location where Henry Choate, an 18-year-old Aboriginal man, was lynched by a mob of 350 armed white men. Now, this particular county courthouse is probably the more infamous locations of a lynching. There, as you guys know, there's been many, but this one in particular happened in 1927. And the circumstances around this particular young man was that he was accused of assaulting a young white girl. And what happened was that she couldn't identify her attacker. Someone had hit her in the head and she had gotten injured, but she couldn't positively identify Henry or her alleged attacker. But he was arrested anyway. He was taken from his grandfather's home and dragged to prison. What happened was that when he got to the prison, the sheriff couldn't contain the mob. The mob came and took him and drug him to the courthouse and hung his body from the second floor of the courthouse. Now, keep in mind, this case against Henry Choate was never proven. Even his own mother was pleading with the mob and saying, please, let my son go to trial. And no one listened, of course. So again, I go back to the imagery of the video. Now, keep in mind here, you see that flag where it's hanging on the courthouse. That's the exact location where Henry was lynched. Now, sometimes the courthouse pictures will show the flag hanging there, sometimes it doesn't. But as you can see from the scene of the lynching, that's exactly where the flag of the courthouse hangs now, today, in 2023. So all of this is symbolic. And you can call it an accident, right? The director can say, oh, well, that was a total accident. But I'm also a director, and we research quite heavily before we even shoot anything. We research. And yes, there are some things that slip through and get through the cracks, and we call them quote unquote accidents. But in this particular case, knowing the history of the courthouse, it's a pretty infamous one. So again, as an American Aboriginal, and from a historical perspective, I'm going to have something to say about this, right? And many people that I've heard that have talked about this all over YouTube, all over the internet, and even people that, look like me say, oh, no, it's not a biggie. What's the controversy? I don't understand the controversy. Well, when you do a deep dive on it, it's pretty serious. And let me tell you, in terms of honoring the ancestors and honoring your own family members and people who lived during this time, they went through some stuff. And so I don't take any of this lightly at all. I'm not necessarily talking about race here so much as I am talking about behavior, and being very mindful of the things that you say and do and what that represents. And so I leave you with this here, because if you're not mindful of your behavior, you're going to continue to do more things. And also, I want to remind everybody, this is the same artist who in 2015, he dressed as the rapper Lil Wayne. And he put brown paint on his skin, and he put on dreadlocks and all of that. Now, granted, Lil Wayne might have been a rapper he liked. Who knows? But again, I say, as a melanated person, I don't have any non-melanated friends who are going around in blackface. None of my non-melanated friends are doing that. So it's a big deal to me when I see somebody who is non-melanated dressing around in blackface. But okay, he made a song that everybody liked, and it's catchy, and it feels good, and people don't think that's a big deal. But in this particular time and space, we can't keep giving people passes, and we can't keep ignoring history, particularly as it relates to the American Aboriginal, and think that it's cool and it's okay. But again, to me, this is a propaganda video to elicit an emotional response from people. But I'm not going to just take the emotional response. I'm also going to give you guys history lessons here, and to remind you of symbolism, and to remind you of things that have happened, so that we're not walking around here being insulted in our faces and we're cool with it. Because this is what's happening. And people who insult you will sometimes do it in a very direct way, and sometimes in a very subtle way. And they say, oh, no, this isn't a pro-lynching video. No, it's not a pro-lynching video. I totally agree with that. It is not. But it certainly has the overtones of, as he would say in his own words, good old boy behavior. So I will leave you with that, and think about it. And always, always, always look at things from a historical perspective before you get too emotional or you become dismissive of things. Anyway, that is the video for now, and I will continue going back to the original video I was going to work on, because that's key and important too. And I will be talking to you guys very, very soon. Thank you so much.